Now, Eddie Howe has vowed that he's still the right man for the club despite 3 successive defeats in all competitions. Let's join our reporter Keith Downey, who was at this morning's news conference. Hi, Keith. How confident is Howe that his job is safe?
I think you probably need to ask him that direct question yourself as to how confident he is. What the feeling I got from him this morning, Tom, was that he'd kind of parked Saturday. He was very downbeat, I would suggest, in the press conference after the 3-2 defeat to Brentford. Of course, that being Newcastle's third defeat on the bounce. They've only won 1 in the last 9, and they're now 10 points below the Champions League places. He was very honest. He was very open. He said on Saturday, "I'm clearly not doing my job properly. I need to go away and have a look at myself." So he's had 24 hours or so until his next press conference. Of course, the schedule for Newcastle right now is absolutely brutal. But it sounded today like he was coming out fighting. It wasn't. I didn't feel as though he feels as though he's under pressure from the sack. It felt more like he was under pressure from himself. And the kind of rhetoric, the narrative today around his press conference and his answers were more along the lines of, if he didn't feel that he was able to do his job to the best of his ability, he would walk rather than be sacked. That was the nature of his comments this morning. So he fielded a number of questions on that. I have to say his demeanour was very different to that, what we saw post-match on Saturday. Of course, as I say, he has parked it. He's trying to move on to the next game, which is Spurs away tomorrow. And this is what he had to say. So take a listen to this. This is his answers to the comments, the question, should I say, on his future at his press conference this morning.
No, there's no doubt in my mind, and that's why I'm sat here. If there was, then I wouldn't be, because, as I said, the club's the most important thing. So I'd never put myself before the club. If I didn't think I was the correct man to take the team forward and I could give the players what they need, then I would step aside and let someone else do it.
Is your appetite for this job and your resilience, or you're talking about resilience there and coming through adversity, are you still as determined to do that now as you were when you arrived 4.5 years ago?
Yeah, I think I am. I think, going back to the previous question, I think the club's always number one, as I said, and I think you've got to, from my perspective, I've got to think that I am the right person for the job and I'm giving value and I'm helping the players and I'm the right person to get results, ultimately. So as long as I feel that in my heart and in my spirit, then my desire and my motivation levels are as high as there's ever been. But I think that's the key question I always have to ask myself. Am I the right person to take the team and the club forward?
How long did it take you to decide that on Sunday?
Well, it's not something I judge every day. It's a feeling that you have. And as long as that feeling is there and remains inside of me, I'll fight every day to the maximum that I can for success for the club.
As a coach or a manager, do you almost have to be at your best when you're up against it a bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where your qualities have to come to the fore, because that's where everyone is looking at you to set the tone, to people want to follow. That's human nature. So if you have strength as a leader in these moments, you can drag everybody with you, and that's where it's the most important time to stand up and show your character and to show how much it means to you.
Keith, we've got Tim Sherwood alongside me, who's been backing Eddie Howe throughout, especially this morning he was as well, and the fans who've been messaging in a little bit mixed, but I'd say far more on Eddie Howe's side. Is this the most pressure he's been under from the fans since he took the job?
Yeah, Tom, without doubt, and he alluded to that this morning. He said this is probably the lowest point. Look, he has been in the trenches a couple of times already and managed to fight his way out of it. I think the difficulty at the moment is, one, the relentless schedule that I mentioned earlier. They've got a game every 3 days. At the moment, they're playing 6 games in 17 days. They've not had a free midweek since the November international break. perhaps he might look at it now and think, did he need to go as strong in the Carabao Cup to try and retain it, getting all the way to that two-legged semi-final? That was a lot of energy, a lot of games on that run. Of course, in the Champions League as well, they've got those 2 extra games, and it couldn't just be against Monaco. They had to draw Karabakh. They've got a 5,000-mile round trip to Karabakh next midweek. So the fixtures have not been kind to him at all, so that hasn't helped with the tiredness. And he mentioned that the players are suffering from mental tiredness at his press conference this morning. Add to that, Tom, last summer recruitment. 5 new players arrived at the cost of around £250 million, a real splurge by the football club, given that they hadn't brought anyone in for 3 transfer windows before then. They had to get it right. And so far, they haven't. At best, I would say the jury is still out on 4 out of those 5 players. Probably only Malik Chow has worked out so far. So that's a lot of money for Newcastle to spend when they're under the pump with regards to PSR for that to not work. Now, had those players all been a success or are being a success right now, Eddie Howe could chop and change and freshen things up. It feels very much like he's playing right now with last season's team minus Alexander Isak plus Malik Chow. So it feels very much like last season's team without his top scorer Alexander Isak. I think we're seeing the residual effect of what happened in the summer regarding Isak. That team was built around him. It was all built to service him. The focal point is now gone. He's brought in Johan Wissa and Nick Voltemad to replace Alexander Isak. One of them has 1 goal in 10, the other has 2 goals in 19, so neither of the strikers firing at the moment, which isn't helping matters. And the issues of last summer's transfer window, the recruitment, which of course Eddie will have to take responsibility for, coming home to roost now. But to answer your question, yeah, I think this is the most pressure he's felt, but as he said there, he puts that pressure on himself. That doesn't come from above, that comes from within. But I think as far as Newcastle fans need to be concerned and to think about, is it's not, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. You know, careful what you wish for. Only 11 months ago, Eddie Howe was on this massive banner from the hotel, the Sandman Hotel across the road from the stadium, as the team went round on an open-top bus in front of 300,000 Newcastle supporters celebrating the Carabao Cup success, their first trophy in 7 long decades. That was the manager that brought that trophy back to the football club. Now, we know football moves on quickly. I feel very much like Eddie Howe should have a lot of credit in the bank as a result of that. But of course, the fans are seeing what they're seeing on the pitch and they're not happy. It was the first time I've heard audible boos, not just at half-time, but at full-time in that 3-2 defeat to Brentford on Saturday. And with 4 away games coming up, Tottenham tomorrow, Villa on Saturday in the FA Cup, Karabakh over in Baku next midweek, and then straight back from that down to the Etihad again to play Manchester City. You don't really see where the next win's going to come from, and that is the problem. It feels like this situation could potentially get a little bit worse before it gets better. So real pressure on at this moment in time. But I have to say, Eddie Howe this morning at his press conference, in comparison to what we heard from him on Saturday, really did come out fighting, and it felt like he'd parked that honesty and maybe slight negativity that we heard from him on Saturday after the Brentford defeat.
OK, Keith, thank you. Let's get the fan view now from Paul Rutter. Paul, good morning to you. You'll have been hearing what Keith was saying there, and he was in Eddie Howe's news conference this morning. What's your opinion of Howe at the moment?
It's still exactly like Keith said, to be honest. The bloke does have so much credit in the bank. Yes, the times are frustrating. Yes, the results aren't great. However, you know, in the 34 years or so that, you know, I've been going on and off, and then, you know, more often than not recently, you know, he's arguably the best manager that we've ever had. So, yes, there was some booing at half-time. That was probably more directed towards Mr. Magoo, who was refereeing the game, to be honest. There was boos at full-time, but again, it's the performance. You've got to expect that. It wasn't a great performance. We did make lots of mistakes. But that isn't a reflection, I don't think, one little bit on Eddie Howe. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I trust the man with my bank card and my PIN number. If he broke into my house on a night and I'd found him, I'd make him a cup of tea and come and have a chat with him. A cup of tea. Man has produced miracles. Semi-finals, 2 finals, a cup, 2 Champions League qualifications whilst battling Richard Masters' myriad of anti-competitive rules. I think the bloke's done an absolute and utter miracle. And I'm glad he is the manager of our club. We've had, 5 or 6 good managers. out of the time I've been watching the club, out of what 34 years, 16 managers, 5 or 6 good managers, Eddie Howe is certainly one of them.
This manager, Eddie Howe, is authentic. There's no acting with Eddie Howe. A load of other managers you see acting, they talk for a reason. He talks from the heart. He's honest. If I'm a Newcastle fan, when this man, he's under pressure now, and like we said, it might be the most difficult spell since he's been there. When you see him interviewed there today, you must be proud to have that man in charge of your team.
Exactly. I mean, not 2 minutes ago, we had Steve Bruce, who blamed the fans for literally the colour of the grass. The bloke was Mr. Deflection, Mr. Teflon. We had Steve Bruce in charge. We've had some other whoppers. You know, your Joe Kinnears of the world, with the greatest of respect. Your John Carvers of the world. Then you've got a bloke who's one of the most genuine people since probably Bobby, Kevin Keegan and the likes, Chrissy Houghton, who I also rated very, very highly. He's a man of great quality, great character. I trust him. Yes, it's a bad time at the moment. Nobody thought that the recruitment was terrible over the summer. Quite the opposite, in fact. And I'd say 90% of the ground were singing Eddie Howe's name. We're fully behind Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall, for that matter. The rest of the coaching team. And it's social media, which, of course, absolutely puts the focus on all the negative side and blows it up, so it looks a little bit proportionate. But certainly from my seat in the East Stand at St James's Park, there was a lot of love and a lot of support and understanding for the situation that Eddie Howe is in.
Yeah, and quite rightly so. I'm glad you mentioned Jason Tindall there, because I always looked at their career together, know them both very, very well. And through the bad times, Jason's always next to him. You know, whether it's good or whether it's bad. Sometimes you see the assistant come out, or the set-piece coach, and wants to stand when all's going well and the sun's shining and the flowers are in the garden. And all of a sudden, in the bad days, they blend into the dugout. Yeah. Jason never does that. He stands. They're in it together. But Eddie is prepared to take all the brunt of it because he's the manager.
Yeah, and he has. And to be fair, Jason Tindall was out. He was demonstrating with the fourth official on numerous occasions, because the referee,
not like him,
just like the Chelsea game, was having an absolute and utter mare. There'll be another apology letter somewhere, I'm sure. But he was there. He was beside Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe was demanding. He was waving his arms. He was trying to motivate. He was trying to do all the right things. It's not like, again, Steve Bruce comes out, picks his teeth and goes back into the dugout. It's not that type of situation. This is a person who he cares. He cares, and you can see that. And I respect and appreciate the fact that Eddie Howe actually cares, because there's been many managers previously that we've had that couldn't absolutely care 2 bits about what happens to the football club. But he genuinely does put the football club before even himself and his family.
If they want to make a change, I challenge anyone to come in and do a better job than Eddie Howe. And if they do decide a knee-jerk reaction because of a small quota of the fans who are a bit disgruntled with his results recently, let him weather this storm, because if you don't, he will be the England manager with Jason Tindall as his assistant after the summer.
Yeah, that's the only way, to be honest, Tim, that he won't be Newcastle manager. The only way is if England approach him and he goes on for a career progression and that side of it. I haven't heard ownership, I haven't heard management say a bad word about him. In fact, quite the opposite.
Good.
Everybody that sits around me has been saying nothing but positive. Do you understand? Look, we've had 30% of our first team out for the majority of the season. You've got Johan Visser back and the likes. Sven Botman's missed loads of time. Lewis Hall's missed loads of time. We're being killed by having to play a 35-year-old 3 times a week. No Tino Livramento. You know, it's a high proportion of injuries that we've got, similar to what Spurs have got. And we are having to make we happen just to get on with it, playing every couple of days. It is what it is, but I still do think that the right man is in charge of the football club, and I'm 100% behind what the club is trying to do. It's a blip. It's a blip.
We need a very quick answer here, Paul. Running out of time. More stories about Sandro Tonali wanting out. Would you just get rid in the summer now?
Look, after the Isaac thing, I think we've all learned a lesson. You don't get too attached to certain players. When you go to the theatre, it's not because of actors. If you go to the circus, it's not to see a specific type of clown. I love Newcastle United. Newcastle United will go on. If Tonali leaves, then he leaves for a huge price tag. I love Tonali. I think he's great. But the club always comes first.
Right. OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed for that.
Thanks,
We've had loads of Newcastle fans getting in touch, showing their support for Eddie